on a special edition of Brian Ross Investigates. Fasten your seatbelts, turbulence ahead. Airlines in an economic freefall. No one is flying. Pilots and flight attendants being furloughed or fired. We're joined by the president of the Flight Attendants Union for United Airlines. The skies are no longer so friendly.
The crisis that hit our industry has brought panic to everyone.
Plus, this week's media winners and losers. Sean Hannity.
Your message will never be heard, whoever you people are.
The White House Press Corps and Kelly Anne Conway. The editor-in-chief of Mediaite rates them all. See if you agree. Plus, your questions about COVID-19 and the law. Your job, your home, your rights.
We'd like to know what rights we have.
What do you suggest we do?
From the Law&Crime Network, this is a special COVID-19 edition of Brian Ross Investigates. Thank you for joining us. I'm Brian Ross, and this is a special edition of our program for the Law&Crime Network and for our viewers on Facebook Live and YouTube Live. I'm joined today by my colleague at Law&Crime, Rhonda Schwartz. And Rhonda, this week we see growing concerns and just a cascade of bad news. No fall-offs in Italy and the death toll from the COVID-19 illness and increasing unemployment. Now, 33 million people filing for unemployment in this country, Rhonda.
And some industries really in dire straits. For example, nobody's flying. We've seen the empty airports. Despite a $25 billion federal bailout package, the famous investor Warren Buffett has pulled all his money out of airline stocks and says he doesn't think that industry will survive.
That's a real question for the pilots and the flight attendants. ABC's Nightline talked with one pilot, Dennis Pager, as he returned to work for the first time. Here's what he told Nightline.
It's been probably over a month since I've been out flying just due to all the cancellations last minute that have happened. Definitely packing a little bit different than I normally do. 3 decades of this, and this is the first time I'm packing things like masks and extra wipes and hand sanitizer.
It's Captain Dennis Tager's first day on the job since March.
Pretty empty, no doubt.
He's traveling from Chicago to Miami, then landing in Houston, documenting his trip along the way.
It'll be a little bit harder to find food than I thought.
Giving us a first-hand account of his new reality.
In your 30-plus years, have you ever seen anything affect the industry quite like COVID-19?
Not this long and deep. I flew in 9/11 and after. I was in New York, and that was a shock on many levels and horror in an area that I don't think any of us ever imagined. This is a different shock to us. It's invisible.
And it's a sentiment shared by everyone who works for an airline. I talked earlier today with the head of the Flight Attendants Union for United Airlines, Ken Diaz. Ken Diaz, thank you so much for joining us. You were flying for business yesterday. What was it like to be in the airports and in the air?
Well, when I went into Chicago's O'Hare Airport to see an empty terminal, it was actually an eerie, frightening feeling. There were more passengers than I thought there would be on the aircraft, but considering that we're only flying 10% of our flights, it was good to see, for the first time, more passengers than employees.
For your members, the flight attendants for United, this must be a very scary time, especially with United now predicting a very, very slow recovery and an entirely different airline.
Well, I think with all the communications that are coming out from management to our employees, I mean, it's a very sobering picture that's being painted because, quite frankly, no one knows when demand is going to return. So flight attendants are afraid for their jobs. Flight attendants are afraid what the future holds. And no one can definitively answer their question because it all depends on demand and what the schedule will be come October 1st. The CARES Act does protect us until that time, but until demand comes back, there's no way to say how many employees will be needed. I mean, we know it's going to be a smaller airline industry as we start up because all the analysts are predicting that it's going to take not months, maybe years to get back to where we were. So Hopefully that will change, but until we can get more definitive answers from not only the government but the traveling public, they have to feel safe to fly. We feel we're doing everything in our power to ensure that safety. Working with the airline, I'm on calls with them every single day, but there is no way to predict the future, not knowing when demand for air travel will come back to our industry. And quite frankly, it's going to come back to the domestic operation much sooner than it comes back to the international operation.
Right. And for those flight attendants who are still working, still flying, what's it like for them up in the air now with passengers? Everyone's wearing a mask, wearing gloves?
So everyone is wearing a mask and wearing gloves. Their temperature is checked before they enter the airport, and that's for all airline workers. So we are trying to put every level of protection, not only for the flight attendants that I represent, but also for the traveling public to, now that they are required to wear a mask, that the comfort level of knowing that their safety is protected of my flight attendants and the traveling public. And it is only that confidence that's going to bring back air travel. We're still working with the government to try to see if our industry could be helped further, because we think we're a model for every industry in this country to keep people off the unemployment lines. I mean, today, 33 million Americans are out of work, and we're essential workers, and we want more testing for flight attendants as they are essential workers, so that can build the confidence level even more. But there's so much uncertainty, which is creating the angst of the flight attendants that I represent.
Absolutely. And how about the real world? Are some of your flight attendant members, have they come down with COVID-19? Are they suffering from it?
Yes. I mean, fortunately, United has had no fatalities. There have been 7 flight attendants in the industry that have passed due to COVID-19. I believe the contact initially, when the response was slow, from all factions, from the government direction, how we stem the tide of infection. And yes, we have quite a few numbers, but what I can report is half of those flight attendants that have been diagnosed and gone through the illness now have tested negative and have returned to work.
Well, that's very good news. Let me ask you this. For your,
I was going to say, even with voluntary furloughs to help the airlines, because this is a balancing act, I am trying to protect our flight attendants, while at the same time working with the airline, because we have to save the airline industry, and we're working to save United Airlines. So with that said, there are just so many unknowns that have to be on a day-by-day basis analyzed, and prudent, smart, and not panic decisions have to be made to resurrect this industry for the protection of the flight attendants that the Association of Flight Attendants represents.
And right, let me ask you about your members now. They're going to suffer real financial hardship here. Is there a safety net for them?
So we do have contractual provisions how furloughs, involuntary furloughs would take place. But what we are in talks with the company now is to make every possible voluntary program available. I have to say that I'm so proud of our flight attendants that for the month of April, we took over half of the voluntary furlough programs offered at United Airlines as our contribution to help the airline get back on its feet, to also help other flight attendants that weren't in a position to take time off of work with no pay. So I applaud the flight attendants that were able to do that, and they numbered over 12,500 for the month of April.
Right, and you know what? They've shown real courage to go back to work, to go up in the air, not knowing exactly what's going on.
Yeah, and you have to realize these are ordinary, citizens that have families, that have children. There is an angst of not knowing their own predicament as far as their financial future. There's an angst, are they coming in contact with the virus? But I think the precautions that we have taken to protect our flight attendants, has shown a level of confidence to the traveling public. So I do believe eventually that will drive demand because people need to feel safe to get on an airplane. And I think that is one area with management that we are working hand in hand, because as long as we can save the industry, I'm also protecting jobs. And I want jobs for people to come back to, that are the good jobs that we've worked decades to build.
All right. Well, Ken Diaz, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. And keep in touch. And to all your members, stay safe.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the time.
Lots of uncertainty and angst for all Americans now as this pandemic continues to sweep across the country. So coming up, your questions about COVID-19 and the law. And then the media's winners and losers. We'll talk with the editor-in-chief of Mediaite about who he thinks is doing well and who isn't. You're watching the Law and Crime Trial Network.